to take a little deeper dive into that topic today. And with David, the sky's the limit. So there's no telling where we'll end up, but we're going to have fun doing it. So David, welcome back.
Usually the sky's the limit means something good. I have a feeling that was tempered with a word of
no. Totally complimentary, my friend.
Right.
Totally complimentary.
Well, the good thing is when I'm sitting at my desk without the adrenaline of the podium, there's a lot less chance for profanity and me to go off the rails and just crazy. Less chance. It's not a zero chance.
Okay, good to know.
So I love this topic of ghost kitchens. I've been getting called about it so frequently since May, probably. It was on people's minds prior to COVID hitting, but since about May of 2020, I probably get a call every 2 weeks about somebody inquiring about how to do or wanting to already do a ghost kitchen. A ghost kitchen is, for lack of a very specific definition, and it can have multiple iterations, but a ghost kitchen is essentially a fully functional commercial kitchen that does not have necessarily a storefront and does not serve guests in-house. And so people are creating these utilizing fully functioning commercial kitchens in less desirable real estate markets and that kind of thing, so that they can take advantage of third-party delivery services, et cetera, to get food, beverages, whatever, out to their customers. Sometimes they cut a takeaway window in the wall. Sometimes they don't. But this is a relatively new phenomenon. We've started seeing people talk about them probably around 2017. They got a little traction in 2018. As some articles were written about, really when the delivery economy peaked was in 2020 because of COVID-19. And, as I was putting my materials together, I sort of veered off the path of this is a CLE and I'm not supposed to have any opinions in it. So when I wrote that third-party delivery services were war profiteers, I had to temper that with war geniuses, because they're one or the other. They talk about being in the right place at the right time. They were already getting 30% of the order most of the time on delivery fees anyway.
But they still can't make money, David, or at least right?
Yeah, it's amazing that companies can have multi-billion-dollar valuations and never turn a profit.
Yeah.
But yeah, they can't seem to make money. They're not really employers.
No.
Their form contracts shift tons of liability to who I consider the good guys, and they're the pieces that they have on the playing board, the pawns that they use on the chessboard are fungible. If you're not driving somebody to the airport, you could be driving a sandwich to my office. And there is something not too special about that. But also I have massive in-group bias toward the restaurant itself. If I made my living representing delivery companies, I'd probably have a thing or two to say about how awesome they are. But from my perspective, they've definitely been a benefit, but they have been an expensive benefit to the restaurant industry. And now we are seeing alcohol to go being allowed in many, many jurisdictions as a way to allow restaurants and bars to make money because they have been shut down during COVID. And so in some states, especially in Texas, they have a specific TABC or liquor permit for delivery companies. But now the restaurants and bars themselves are able to sell alcohol to go under a temporary measure. And I will tell you guys that the Texas legislative session that is going forward right now, I would bet money that we will see alcohol to go permanently in some form or fashion come out of this legislative session in Texas, which would be great. But back to the ghost kitchen thing. Ghost kitchens can be spun up by anybody with the money to build a kitchen and a website. And so you may get on Uber Eats this afternoon, hopefully not right now. Usually I give my foodborne illness talk after lunch. Now I'm giving the ghost kitchen talk during lunch. But hopefully after I'm finished, you'll jump on your phone during the break and jump into an Uber Eats, DoorDash, Caviar, something like that. And you will scroll down past the brand names that you know, and you will see brand names that you don't know. And if you do a little digging, you will probably figure out that those don't really exist in a brick and mortar form anywhere. And so anyone with an idea to capitalize on, oh, the delivery marketplace is so strong and people aren't leaving their homes because of COVID, et cetera, whatever, could rent out a commercial kitchen, put a website together, hire some cooks, and start selling from what effectively is a ghost kitchen. The way that this, and that's essentially its most basic form. The way that I think that it really works and augments a food service operator's portfolio is when it is used as sort of almost like a commissary kitchen or a secondary food prep area, or is a way to do what I call in the paper side hustles. And we have a great client who's got a handful of really unique restaurants here in North Texas, and he has created, and I talked about it in the paper and a little bit in the PowerPoint too, but he created in each of his existing restaurant locations at least one and sometimes two different additional brands that we trademarked and are fully functional brands that are only just on the web. And so you either during slow times or during the weekends or during night or whatever, you can jump onto Solid Gold Fried Chicken, and you can get fried chicken from a place that isn't normally known for fried chicken, and you really can only order it through the internet. And I think that it has augmented their ability to use ingredients that they have in the kitchen anyway. It has expanded their offerings to people that are fully utilizing the to-go and delivery economy that may not be coming to have a seat in their restaurants. And boy, it's working out really well. And it's just been an enjoyable way to experience a new kind of food from somebody that already puts out an amazing product. And that has just been a really cool way to see this used. It isn't a new space. It's simply a pivot in an existing space. And then the other thing is we will see almost like a food hall, but not open to the public, where they'll put 4 or 5 slots together, and the person that controls the property will then lease out these 4 or 5 slots to different concepts, and they'll share kitchen space. They'll have their own cages for storage and whatever, but it can take a few different iterations. But effectively, it's a frat house of 4 or 5 restaurant concepts working independently with basically spaces for the different delivery companies to come and pick up the orders that are being generated through the app. So it's a way to dip your toe into a new market. In fact, when Chick-fil-A was protested in San Francisco and people said, we don't want Chick-fil-A here, they actually took a spot inside of DoorDash's own corporate ghost kitchen and are selling product there, but they don't have a brick and mortar restaurant in that trade area. They have since announced that they are going to open a brick and mortar restaurant there. But I mean, lines of delivery people out the door to pick up Chick-fil-A for that market. And
where they're
smart.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely.
That's pretty smart. I want to jump back to something you said. I just want to make sure I understand this. If I'm going to do a ghost kitchen, I still have to be concerned with all of the food licensing and sanitation issues, even though I'm not having the public inside. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that we are telling people to think of these is that they are restaurants that with no indoor seating. So, equivalent of a donut shop. I mean, it's just, okay. So even if they don't have a takeout component for the public, the takeout component for the Uber Eats driver is effectively open to the public. And so they still have to go through all of the health inspections. They have to go through all the permitting. They still have to have 3 compartment sinks. They still have to have grease traps. They still have to have chases if they're in the bottom of a building that's got multiple floors. So everything is the same, except in the way that these were originally conceived was that the desire to not pay ultra super prime real estate at the corner of Main and First. And so if you can find a really cheap warehouse spot, you might be able to finish out that kitchen and install a grease trap and all of your vent hoods and walk-ins and everything for a lot less money than you could do it in the prime market, because you don't have to worry about visibility, signage, whatever. I mean, you just need a place for people to pull up their cars and get out and effectively and easily pick up the product and move it around. But I'm encouraging people to try to put picnic tables outside, to try to cut a to-go window, like an ice cream shop, something. You don't have to have a drive-through. You wouldn't, that would be really abnormal, but I like to encourage people to try to capitalize on what might be walk-up business that they sort of see as an unforeseen bit of gravy on their P&L.
Yeah. David, listen, this is fascinating. I want you to spend a few minutes making sure the audience hears you talk about your lease negotiation and avoiding the fee that you pay, to these third-party delivery services, carving that out of your gross revenue for percentage rents.
Sure.
And my guess would be, though, David, is when you're locking up a lease, more than likely for a ghost kitchen, the landlord is, they may be savvy today and they may want a gross percentage, but I'm thinking that they'd probably be if there ever was going to be a flat rent or, with a triple net type situation like we're used to, that might be the time. But I'm guessing they could still do gross percentage leases, and then you got to be really careful. I'm sorry, you go ahead. I stepped all over that. Go ahead.
No, totally. And it's been a concern since the advent of the real third-party delivery service. And as an aside, that's really it fits in here. If there is any way that you can create your own delivery mechanism, you should do it. I mean, mom and pop pizza places have been doing their own delivery for generations. It isn't hard. People are scared of it. They think there's some extra liability. Get, non-owned auto and get the right insurance and do your own delivery, and do not pay 30% to these companies just because they have an app, because most of the POS systems now have a mechanism for you to run delivery through it. But anyway, if you can accomplish that, you don't have to worry about what we're about to talk about. So when a delivery company charges you the fee that you are paying them for their service, for their delivery service, the gross 100% of the gross sale is going to run through your POS system, and they're going to bill you back their 20, 25, 30%, whatever, 15% if you've gotten a sweetheart deal. But that's going to hit your gross sales. And we are seeing a lot of percentage rent situations in these ghost kitchens because the landlord and effectively the tenant doesn't know what the volume is going to be. They're really paranoid of paying a base rent. And so the landlords are usually pretty amenable and almost encouraged by a percentage rent only situation. But also if you go into a more commercial, sort of light industrial area, those landlords don't know how food service tenants work. They don't really even know what food service tenants leases look like. So they're not used to having restaurants and bars. They're used to having shipping companies and landscapers and God knows what, And so there's a lot of education that happens there. But in the idea of making sure that these fees are carved out of your tally of gross sales, I mean, historically, we've had really good success getting credit card fees taken out, credit card processing fees, that 2 to 3% merchant share, and tips. And tips aren't even the restaurant's money, but you don't want to accidentally get charged percentage rent on it. So you would carve that out. And it is a big number, but it will never hit your bottom line and should therefore not be counted as a percentage of gross sales just because of the way the third-party delivery company is billing you for their service. So you will never see that money. You will never see, just like any mixed beverage excise tax or something or sales tax, you're not going to pay percentage rent on tax. It's almost the same thing. So just making sure that if you're going to add this component or you're going to start doing a ton of delivery, this was a real concern for people who had never done delivery before and had to do it or die during COVID. And they didn't necessarily hit their break points because the sales were so low They didn't hit their percentage rent breakpoints in their leases, but they were concerned that when the pipeline opened back up and people had become accustomed in 2020 to using delivery services, that in the future they might have some real percentage rent problems. And so as we were negotiating force majeure and COVID-related, pandemic-related lease amendments, we tried to get some of these changes put into the calculation of gross sales. And once you explain it to a landlord that wants to keep a tenant, they've been pretty receptive to the change. But negotiating it up front, and especially what we talked about before, is leases that are more than 5 or 6 years old, we weren't contemplating this in the first place. So it wasn't really even a thing. And now it's a major thing, and is only going to continue to grow even when we go back to not wearing masks, whenever that is. People will have become so accustomed to delivery that we're not going to untrain them or retrain them not to use it. They're going to continue to use it. So,
well, staying down that path, David, I know we've talked before, but I want to get your insight today because we've had it's just become so ubiquitous, this delivery and even just curbside pickup. But what are you seeing creatively, or what do you think are best practices in terms of the supply chain security aspect of, the food coming from a place, getting delivered to a third party, the third party delivering it to the ultimate consumer? A lot can go wrong there.
Absolutely.
What are you suggesting? What are you recommending? What are you seeing that you would share with everyone?
So Monday, I ordered a poke bowl to be delivered to me at my office, which is raw fish and rice. It's really healthy and it's a good choice, and I was happy to do it. And my DoorDash driver picked up another order on the way, and my raw fish took an extra hour to get to me.
Oh,
so it was perfectly sealed. It had a 3M sticker on it. It was tamper-proof. And as I looked on the app to see where in the world is my lunch, I realized my lunch had gone to the other side of town and was just sitting around waiting for somebody else after it had been picked up. So I reached out to customer service. I got a refund. I threw it in the trash when I got here. I mean, an warm tuna isn't an hour in the car isn't necessarily going to, kill a person. But I don't know if that person was running the heat. I don't know. I mean, it was pretty chilly on Monday, so I don't know if they were running the heat. I have no idea. So it was an hour and a half total from order time or more than an hour and a half to delivery. I just threw it out.
Yeah.
So that's the kind of thing that we have to worry about. That's the kind of thing we want liability shifted in those contracts. We want liability for chain of custody and the operator, in addition to making sure that their to-go materials are well branded. Just as an outbound sign of restaurant marketing, they need to make the end user confident that nothing has happened to it. One of the surveys that I try to quote as much as I can is, a third of delivery drivers admit to eating food out of the bag. That doesn't go for 2/3 that don't admit to eating food out of the bag. So I try not to order French fries for delivery because they tend not to travel too well, but I have to wonder if somebody's picking fries out of the bag.
Right.
Shake Shack does a lot of third-party delivery, and those fries are pretty good, and it's a huge temptation, So investing in those tamper-proof stickers or those really good containers. I mean, 3M stickers went up by 300% by April of 2020. Just in price because the demand was skyrocketing for tamper-proof stickers. Guess what? It makes sense. It does. But they're such a good idea, and they are you could just put them on the line, and it's a mindless piece of muscle memory at some point to just put a sticker on everything that goes out of there. And guess what? If they go up 300%, you might want to consider a 15 or a 5 cent per order paper surcharge. We have some clients that did that. I don't mind, 5 cents an order isn't gonna break me.
No elasticity there. Yeah, no, that's right. Yeah.
It wasn't even 5 cents per menu item. It was just 5 cents per ticket or something. And it at least helps offset the cost of pushing out so many to-go containers.
Yeah. Speaking of that, David, I'd like to make the point for everybody that I do think we're just still a little behind. Not everybody, but still quite a few of us in the restaurant community that we're really not focusing on sustainability and the environment. And I really wish we would, to a greater degree than we are. The straw issue seems to be still out of hand, but a lot of containers, of course, it's kind of the Amazon effect, right? There's so many containers going out. At the very least, I hope we are all asking consumers if they need the plastic utensils or the straws before we just put them in every single bag, because there's so much more plastic being generated and delivered, as this process is unfolding, that I think we just need to be more mindful of that. Sorry, David, I just had to get on my soapbox there for a moment.
And plastic bag bans are a thing of hazy memory at this point, because they couldn't possibly be enforced, even if they were, if people that have recently implemented plastic bag bans, I can't imagine that they are still moving forward with that, with the only way to survive being to go and curbside delivery to curbside takeout. But it's been great to see these side hustles pop up. It's really neat to see some creativity. We're working on a project now where a guy has bought an old church, and it has plenty of space, and they're going to run 5 brands out of it. And it's going to have some picnic tables, and they'll probably set up a movie screen at nighttime or something to, show some crazy videos or whatever. I don't know, but it's going to be a place where people can congregate, but it has 0 plans for in-house dining, and it's all going to be done through an app and through the website. So yeah, it's pretty cool.
So it sounds like a modified food hall.
Food hall with no door.
No door. Yeah, interesting. So speaking of food halls, though, David, because a lot of the concepts that are on today, they might be interested in participating in a food hall. Any lessons you've learned for the individual operator that joins in a food hall that you might be able to talk about and share some insight for some folks that they need to be top of mind?
So these things can run from fair to the worst and most draconian agreements I've ever seen. So we worked on a really popular food hall project here for, I think, 4 of our clients were in the first crop of concepts that were brought into this food hall. And first of all, they didn't give you a lease. It was a license for space on the floor, which is some interest in real property, but they took great pains to make sure that it wasn't even called a lease. But I promise you, if we had to litigate it, it certainly would have been a sublease. But also the overhead charges and the percentage of profit or gross sales that were charged back just to occupy the space, they were paying 1/3 of gross at the end of the day. They could not even afford to hire employees to work the space. So the deal has to make sense, because most of the time you'll get a startup concept or an offshoot of a concept, sort of a downtown concept that wants to go into the extreme suburbs and dip their toe in the water, and they have to be able to make money. And so the food hall concept runs into lots of hurdles about who is selling alcohol, who is selling food, is it one POS, is there one pantry from which everybody gets to grab flour and salt and God knows what, because the food hall itself has the contract with the supplier, at which point you have to wonder who's getting the kickback from the supplier. So many questions, because food halls can be really cool when they're done well, but when they are forced square peg into a round hole, and they're used as every segment of it is used as a profit center, the whole thing is probably going to collapse under its own weight. And so we've been on the food hall side, and we have been on the tenant side of some of these projects, and there are so many lessons that we've learned from these food halls. They can be really great. Parking is an issue. Some of them don't use money. You either have to buy a card that works at all of, like at a Dave & Buster's, you have to buy a card, and it works at all of the food stations, or you can use credit cards, but they don't transact any in cash. I mean, we're probably headed toward a cashless society, but that is still really inconvenient for people. And if you don't know the rules before you go, then that can be off-putting. But, figuring out who's selling the booze and who owns the liquor permit and does the liquor permit cover all of the food stalls can be a real hurdle depending on your jurisdiction, depending on the city, depending on whether they're determined whether you're a restaurant or not.
Yeah.
And these purveyors, these tenants want booze revenue, and they're not allowed, if they're not allowed by the food hall to sell alcohol, then, and the food hall as the seller of alcohol is not allowed to share alcohol revenue with them, you run into this sort of wink, wink, nudge, nudge problem where it starts to look like Elizabeth knows the bad word of subterfuge. And when people just want to get it built and cut corners, you can run into some real problems. So I have a respect for what the food hall could and should be, and I've seen a bunch of mistakes.
Wow. Yeah, I'm sure you have. Interesting. Well, it's a concept I think that's here to stay because it really does reduce the entry money in a lot of situations, and gives opportunities for people to dip their toe in the water, as you mentioned. So, yeah, we'll see how it goes. I want to be mindful of our time, David. I want to open the door to anybody. We've had our conversation, but anybody else have any questions they have for David right now? We have a shy group today, David.
Yeah. If you don't get anything out of this, go and check out the Chuck E. Cheese story that's in the paper and in the slideshow. It's crazy.
It is crazy.
He's created a fake brand to sell pizza and wings during the pandemic called Pasquale's Pizza and Wings. And Pasquale is the chef that's in the Chuck E. Cheese band. And there was a Grubhub user who probably recognized it from a kid's birthday party and sort of blew it up online, and buyer beware. But that was a ghost kitchen coming out of a Chuck E. Cheese under a new brand name. And the kicker was that in West Philadelphia, there was already a Pasquale's Pizza that they were siphoning business from. God love him. So anyway, crazy, man.
That I found that to be just really fascinating when you shared that story. And look, there's no telling how many times that idea is being replicated throughout the country, right? Because there's nothing illegal about that. I was trying to think, perhaps, is it deceptive? I don't think so, right?
Well, it probably is trademark infringement in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania. It's probably, even West Philadelphia's favorite Pasquale's pizza joint doesn't have a federal trademark. It's been around long enough, they probably have a common law trademark. And so, if they wanted to pick a fight, they probably could have, but boy, it looks bad when somebody using Grubhub is trying to shop local and ends up buying from a major brand, which, everybody's got to do what they can to survive. That's why it's almost disingenuous for me to call Uber Eats war profiteer when they're just trying to make money too. But
it's quite all right.
It's still a crazy story. I did enjoy it. I always try to find one every year that just makes my eyes pop out. And that was the one.
That's a good one too. We're going to leave it at that, David. As always, thank you.